And welcome back to this episode of Paint Society. We have this 92 Civic hatchback that was imported from Japan. It is a left-hand drive. And we're going to be doing some minor repair to the fender right in this area. The wheel actually pulled the fender a little bit, so it got some PDR work already done, and we're going to be fixing this little scrape. So a little backstory here. The full car got a full restoration paint job, and the owner picked it up as a shell, and he did all of the work as far as the motor is concerned, interior, suspension, and got it back on the road. And you can see here that this car is coated in a ceramic coating, so nothing is sticking. Maybe this is just a glimpse into the issues that we might have had with this car. If you pay attention, you'll find out exactly what we went through in this journey. So we're good to go. If you have any issues with that, just use some solvent cleaner to get any sort of that grease or wax that might be on the surface, and then you can clearly just put some tape on. For here, we're going to try to keep it as small as possible. We're going to be using a P180, and the fender is rolled, so it kind of is already contoured out, so it's a little bit flared out, but even still, it caught the inner lip, but we ended up shaving that off anyway. So we're going to kind of try to keep it small as possible. We're using everything on a block here for body filler. We're using 180 once again, just to kind of feather that out and smooth it out as much as possible. If you're using a DA for this, you can kind of create some waviness that you don't want, and you have more control using this block. So it's just a little bit of a 3M block and some little bit of 3M glaze. And this is just because there was a tiny little indentation after the PDR work was done. The whole goal here is to try to keep this repair as tight and as small as possible, and that is the intent of this job. So a little bit of glaze, and glaze is a very lightweight body filler. A body filler typically is a lot thicker, but it didn't need that. And it typically will dry and sand a lot quicker and easier than that of body filler. So all we're going to be doing here is feathering out the repair once again. I'm not going to get into it with a P80. I'm going to be using a P180 because I don't want to create more work for myself. I want to keep it as small as possible. That is the name of the game here. The fender is already small. The car is already small. So a small blend is kind of what we're after here. Now, I did notice some other chips towards the front of the fender, which we will get into, which kind of put us back a little bit as far as extending this color a little bit further than what we want it, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Here we're using a P320, and we're not sanding the body filler as far as shaping. We're just refining the body filler in the area around the body filler, preparing it for primer. So once again, the P320 should have no effect on the shaping of the body filler. It's just to scuff up the surrounding areas and run over some P320 so that when the primer goes over the filler, it can shrink into such a small sand scratch like P320 instead of P180. Here we're using just a 2K urethane primer. This is a white primer that we're using, and we're just barely putting it on. We want to try to contain this as much as possible. So containing it to about 3 or 4 inches past our body repair area is exactly what we're doing here. We'll allow that to dry up overnight, and once it dries up overnight, we'll start to prepare the surface of this fender. We don't have a lot of room. The paint coat on this particular car is B62P. This is Captiva Blue, so a little bit of guide coat will help us get things all situated. We're using a P400 here. We are not going too aggressive because we are not going to seal this. We want to keep it as small as possible. You've heard me say that 2 or 3 times already. So we're going to sand this primer until all of the guide coat is completely removed. And so the guide coat, the purpose of the guide coat is to go to the deepest surfaces of the primer. You can see where it stays. It's staying in a little bit of that area right in that towards the bottom of the fender. And you want to sand out all of your guide coat so that you know when you put your paint down, everything is completely flat and prepared. So if you need to go back at this point, you can go back, but we didn't. We had a good repair that was done with just 1 coat of primer. We'll prepare the rest of the actual fender here with a P600 grit. And that's all we needed to do here. Just seems like a simple job that we're going to go ahead and blend it and be fine with it. Now, one thing that you do run into is when you have a repainted car, you will have the paint code, but we're not necessarily sure that it is the exact paint that came from the factory on this car, or it's the exact paint that we're going to be using in our system. So the paint code is B62P, and if someone were to look at this car, they wouldn't know any different if it was a shade lighter, a shade bluer, a shade purpler, a shade redder. You wouldn't know because you're looking at this car. It's a 92 Civic hatch. It looks blue. It's got that Captiva blue look. It's Captiva blue. So when coming to blend these colors, sometimes you can run into some issues if it's fully repainted. And even from the factory, let's say this car never been repainted, well, these colors are going to pale out. They're going to fade out. They might get darker. They might get lighter. You're dealing with a car that's 35 plus years, pushing 40 years, you know. So you're going to deal with instances where it's going to be tough to match the color and sometimes to blend the color. But we're not there yet. So we'll go ahead and get everything scuffed up. We're using a maroon scuff pad. The maroon scuff pad will go ahead and scuff all of our edges that we don't want to use a DA sander because we don't want to break through. If we break through, then we're going to have to apply paint on all of the other panels to blend the color. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep it as small as possible. And that's just what we're going to be doing with this repair. So for this repair, we went ahead and got our Captiva blue all mixed up. And I wasn't taking any chances with this color. I got a good color that it looks like it could blend out just fine. This color was running a little bit more purple than I'm used to. So this is Captiva blue in the DV1. And we're going to be going ahead and doing just a very, very, very small blend. Now, once again, I did have some small, tiny chips towards the front of that fender that I did sand them, and you can't pick it up on camera, but I'm going to be moving my color a little bit towards the front of that fender just to get some of that color on there. Now, when I do this, I'm barely putting any color on. Even though I'm moving fast, paint is not coming out of the gun. Air and paint. I'm putting a little bit of paint, I'm putting a little bit of air to dry it. I'm trying to do it here and keep it small and see what my color looks like. So if I can kind of get out of this in one pass or one visit to the paint booth and then clear it, then I'm going to be good. But as I'm putting it on, I'm noticing this color either doesn't have proper coverage yet or it's running a little bit too light. So that's in the back of my head right now that something might not be perfectly right. But sometimes when we blend these colors out and get full coverage, usually most of the time, the problem, 9 times out of 10, it goes away. So again, this is what I'm doing, just moving back and forth, and again on the panel, and then I bring it back and show you air, and then a little bit of paint, okay? Air and a little bit of paint coming out. So I'm not there spraying a whole bunch of paint. I'm just trying to dry it as I go and see what the color looks like so I can just keep this as contained as possible. So once I get that down, I'm looking at it and I'm like, guys, this is not a color I can blend out. This is not right. Something is wrong here. Is this Captiva blue? Is this color paled out? What's going on here? So I went back, I added a little bit of some toners that I needed, 2 toners, to just kind of make it a little bit more redder and a little bit more violet. And once I got that down, I put that down on the vehicle, which we did right here. And you can see I already sanded it down. I used a 600 grit because I didn't want my overspray to go too far and then have to cover my overspray closer to the door with this new color. So I'm putting this on and I'm like, all right, this is looking pretty good. I'm happy with it. Pretty content with the way that it's coming out of the gun. It's a nice night. It's around 75 degrees in the booth. Everything's flowing out. It's not going on dry. And it's looking like it's blending out. So I go to my next step, which I take the original color. And the original color, it's got too much strength at this point to blend out. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use some blending additive to help soften up that color to make it a little bit more transparent. And I don't use any chemistry here, in all honesty. I just put like usually 1-to-1. So I'll drop some of it in there. Maybe that's a little bit more than 1-to-1, but it won't really affect anything. And then I'll use a little bit more extra slow reducer, make a little bit of a cocktail out of that. And at this point, that color it's lost its strength. Basically, it's much more translucent. And this won't really change the color, but this will help blend it. So we have a very transparent color. It's the same color, and we're going to fade that over the whole entire area that we just painted to lose the blend. And if you look at the contour of the fender is going to change the color a little bit towards the back of the fender. So it's going to be a little bit different in an area just because of the flip or the way that you look at it from the side tone. It changes that color. So these are some things to keep in mind when matching color. But everything looked good, so I went ahead and, of course, did what any other painter would do, is clear coat the fender. And everything's looking good. It's blending out. It blended out pretty good. And we're using our Segola here, the 4600. And for the particular clear coat that we're using, this is the Select 4.0. It calls for a 1.4 fluid tip, and that's exactly what we did. So we got a nice finish out of this. We knocked on our second coat. It says flash time on here is 5 minutes for this 4.0, and I'll leave a link in the description to this actual clear coat. It's a pretty good clear coat. We use it on basically all the cars that we have in a shop, and I like the way that it gets on the panel and it holds itself pretty well. So after that's all done and wrapped up, we have a beautiful fender. And the next morning we roll back into the booth, and since this car has been repainted, it has been completely cut flat. And when it's cut flat, well, we'll see that our next process is to go ahead and sand this down. Usually no panel you can ever get dead flat or have that look of a sanded and polished panel. So you're going to have a little bit of that factory texture in there. So that's what we did here. We went ahead and unmasked it first, got everything unmasked, got it out of the booth. This is the first time I actually drive a left-hand drive car, and it's super weird. And it has no power steering. So the guys were laughing at me in the shop about it because I got a nice workout. So this is a 2000 grit. We're just going to go over the panel. This is going to cut any small factory texture, or if there's any pieces of dirt or anything in the actual panel. But it came out really clean. I was really happy with the way it came out. So we went over it with the rotary polisher first and our compound, and it shined up really good. It's looking pretty good. As I'm buffing it, though, I'm noticing that the color looks a little bit blue. I mean, these are things in the back of my mind as I'm polishing and I'm looking at the rest of the car. The color might be more consistent with Captiva blue, but it's looking more blue than purple. So keep that in the back of your head right now. It's looking more blue than purple, but maybe it's the lighting. Sometimes when those fluorescents come down on you and they hit the fender or the paint or whatever you're working on, they can change the color of the car. So I did what I always do. I pulled the car outside and I continued to look at it throughout the course of the day and see if it looked good or bad, if it was just me. I asked my friends. Of course, a painter sees what other people don't see. And every car that leaves the paint booth or leaves the shop, it's got my name on it, and I want it to be the best possible job that I could do. The best possible job that I could do was not what you're looking at right now. The best possible job that I could do is better, because I'm looking at the bumper, right? And even though the bumper is more purple than the rest of the car, I'm still seeing a little bit of blue, a little bit more blue in that fender above the wheel. So I keep on looking at it, and you'll be able to catch the bumper looking a little bit lighter than the rest of the car, a little bit more purple than the rest of the car. And it is my job to fix this. It is my job. It doesn't matter if I already spent X amount of time working on it, buffing it, putting it together. It does not matter. So here we go, back in the morning again. A good night's sleep really does get your mind clear. It really helps to get your feet running. Don't try to fix things in the moment. Come back the next day. Think about what you could possibly do better. Think about all your options. Sand it back down. We're lucky it's just a fender. It's nothing more than that. So there's a lot of frustration in this. This is like my face usually. I'm like, is this the color that's going to save us? I don't know. But hopefully it is. This is the new spray out card. And if you look at the old spray out card, and sometimes these are hard to see on camera, but the new spray out cards, it's more purple than the original. You see the back there, it's a little bit more bluer. And I checked this in a light too outside, and it is a little bit more purple. It's a little bit paler actually. I checked it up on the car. One thing I probably want to do is check the back of the car and check more right next to where I'm painting, because who knows if this car had been repainted in the back of it or if they got a different mix and blended it. I need to really check the color right next to the fender. But I'm putting it on. As I put it on, I'm like, yeah, this color is looking more right. This color is looking more of that purplish tone. And when you know, you know. And that's exactly what happened here. I knew that it was going to be better. I actually had pulled a little piece off the bumper there of tape, and I checked it up before I clear coated it. And I ended up just being a much better match. So here we go again. Clear coat, 2 coats of clear coat, and what we have to do now, but other than to check it out and see what it looks like. And you might drive yourself a little bit crazy working on different things, but the end result really makes you feel good when you're able to take something that wasn't right and to fix your problems. And that's exactly what I think we have here. So I appreciate y'all coming on my journey with me to correct an issue. You can see that it's much purpler. It's not a dramatic change, but it's a change that we needed to get this car right. It's the change that we needed to make it look good and to really give a respectable repair to this 92 hatch, and a nice little challenge for myself. It doesn't matter if we didn't get it in the first shot. We got it in the second shot. And that's all that really matters here. So, guys, this is Brian from Paint Society. I'm reminding you, don't overthink it. It's just paint. And if you got to redo it, and get it right the next time. I'll see you guys on the next episode.